Welcome to this explainer. If you've been feeling like the rules of building a business just kind of changed overnight, well, you aren't crazy. The ground is literally shifting beneath us as we speak. Today, we're diving into a staggering, absolutely massive shift in modern workforce economics. We're going to unpack a phenomenon that is completely rewriting the rules of business scaling, and we'll uncover the reality behind what's being called AI-driven talent density. So whether you're a builder, a founder, or maybe you're just trying to navigate your own career, this is going to fundamentally change how you look at productivity. Let's get right into it.
Let's kick things off with a number that is just a massive shock to the system: $4.7 million. That's the estimated annual revenue generated per employee by the AI native company Midjourney. Let that sink in for a second. Almost $5 million for every single person on the payroll. And honestly, here's the real kicker. They're completely bootstrapped, zero outside venture capital, profitable within 2 months of launch, and they operate with absolutely no marketing budget and zero sales team. Just raw, concentrated output.
So, how is that physically possible? How does a tiny team of roughly 100 people generate about $500 million in revenue? That level of output absolutely defies the entire history of software economics. Under the old model, getting to $500 million in revenue meant hiring absolute armies of developers, layers of middle management, a massive global sales team. You basically built an empire of human capital. To wrap our heads around why that rulebook has just been thrown out the window, we have to rethink everything we thought we knew about how companies actually grow.
Section 1. The broken productivity metric. To really grasp the sheer scale of this shift, we have to look at how the traditional yardstick for software productivity has just completely broken down.
The stark contrast in these numbers really tells the whole story. For a solid decade, the median private SaaS company, the traditional subscription software model we're all used to, sat very comfortably at about $130,000 in revenue per employee. The absolute best traditional software businesses out there were incredibly proud to reach maybe $300,000 to $400,000. But look at those bottom two rows. AI-native companies like Cursor, crossing $2 billion in annualized revenue with a team in the low hundreds, they're hitting $3.3 million per head. And Midjourney is at that staggering $4.7 million mark. It's hard to overstate this gap. If you put these on a traditional bar chart, you wouldn't even be able to see the $130,000 bar. These new numbers don't just stretch the chart, they completely break the y-axis.
And if we zoom out to a massive macroeconomic scale, this point gets even clearer. Look at the historical headcount required to reach a $30 billion revenue run rate. Salesforce needed sprawling global campuses, massive HR departments, and roughly 79,000 people to hit that milestone. Google needed about 32,000. But the frontier AI lab Anthropic crossed that exact same $30 billion line with somewhere between just 2,500 and 5,000 employees. You could practically fit their entire staff into one single mid-sized office building. This isn't just a rounding error or some slight optimization. This is a 10 to 38x break from historical norms.
Section 2. Redefining talent density. So how exactly are they pulling this off? Well, it's a supercharged evolution of a concept known as talent density.
This concept of talent density actually started out as a management philosophy over at Netflix, coined by Reed Hastings and Aaron Meyer. They basically observed that a team of a few exceptional people doesn't just perform a bit better, it operates in a different mode entirely. When you concentrate high performers and completely remove the mediocre ones, you don't just get incremental improvements. You get fewer people, deeper trust, and vastly less process. When that different mode kicks in, a product feature that used to take 3 fiscal quarters of planning suddenly ships in a matter of days.
But here's the really crucial point. AI took that original Netflix multiplier and cranked it up by an order of magnitude. In the AI era, this is no longer just a management philosophy, it is a powerful economic force. AI literally absorbs entire categories of work into the product itself. Think about functions like Tier 1 customer support, fast design iteration, initial sales outreach. Stuff that used to require whole departments is now folded directly into the software. The result? These tiny, ultra-capable teams can outbuild giant companies with a near-zero coordination tax. And by coordination tax, I mean those endless, soul-crushing Zoom meetings just to get 3 different departments to agree on what shade of blue a button should be. They just don't get bogged down in the bureaucracy that slows large organizations to an absolute crawl.
But achieving this requires a completely new archetype of worker. Because you can't just buy an AI subscription, throw it at a traditional team, and expect these astronomical results. No way. You need what's rapidly emerging as a scarce triple threat skill set. First is taste. What does that mean in action?
It means having the sharp intuition to know what is actually worth building in a world where building is practically free. Second is deep customer understanding. Finding the real bleeding neck problems your users face rather than just building cool tech for the sake of it. And third is fluency with the jagged edge of AI capability. Model capabilities shift every few weeks, right? You have to know exactly what the AI is brilliant at, like writing flawless boilerplate code, and what it's terrible at, like basic structural formatting. A single person holding these three traits, backed by AI leverage, is effectively acting as a one-person department.
Section 3. The honest bear case. Because before we get too carried away, intellectual honesty requires us to slow down and look past the hype.
First up is what we call the run rate trap. A lot of these viral, headline-grabbing statistics are kind of artificially inflated. When a startup is doubling its growth every few months, taking just last month's revenue and multiplying it by 12 creates this massive annualized spike. Actually, scratch that. It looks fantastic for going viral on social media, sure, but it dramatically inflates the per-employee number compared to what an audited full-year GAAP revenue report would show. The actual undeniable math of a full year's settled finances is often a bit more grounded.
And this leads us to perhaps the biggest caveat of all. When we marvel at this incredible productivity, we have to realize that the raw work didn't just magically vanish into thin air. It simply moved ledgers. The heavy lifting shifted off the traditional human payroll ledger and onto the cost of goods sold ledger, showing up as massive API inference bills. An API inference bill is simply the computing cost of the AI's brain actually thinking, processing, and generating answers.
Think about it like this. When a tiny AI company like Cursor spends billions on API calls to Anthropic or OpenAI, they are essentially buying substitute labor. The AI model is doing the cognitive heavy lifting that a junior developer or an analyst used to do. Because that multi-billion-dollar spend doesn't show up as human headcount, it never enters the denominator for revenue per employee, creating this brilliant accounting illusion. Instead of paying for a human salary, comprehensive health insurance, and endless office snacks, they are paying to keep massive server farms cool. Now, Midjourney is actually a rare exception here because they run their own models on their own hardware, internalizing that cost. But for many others, they're just swapping human payroll for server farm rental.
And that brings us to the generalization problem. It's a textbook base rate fallacy to assume that just because a viral AI-native design tool operates this way, a traditional healthcare or logistics company can automatically do it too. They can't. Furthermore, many of these early startups intentionally run negative gross margins. That means they are actively selling their service for less than it costs them in API computing power to run it, just burning cash to grab market share and build a defensive moat. We really don't know what their profit margins will look like when they actually have to balance the books in 3 years. More importantly, it remains entirely unproven if you can extend these crazy talent density multiples to complex enterprise software with long relationship-driven sales cycles or to heavily regulated industries that require massive, human-driven field operations.
Section 4. Decoupling output from headcount. Keeping those very real structural caveats in mind, we still have to acknowledge a fundamental macroeconomic shift is happening.
We are entering what can only be described as a post-labor era. Let's feel the historical weight of that for a second. During the Industrial Revolution, and really for the entirety of industrial history that followed, if a company wanted to create more economic output, they had to build massive factories and hire thousands more workers. It was a highly stable, predictable ratio. More scale meant more humans. But today, the combination of hyper-concentrated talent density and massive AI leverage is permanently decoupling that relationship. Massive economic output no longer explicitly requires massive human headcount. We have literally gone from building industrial empires with tens of thousands of workers to building digital empires with a dozen laptops.
And to put a concrete probability on just how fast this decoupling is happening, the CEO of Anthropic has publicly stated there are 70 to 80% odds that we will see the very first one-person billion-dollar company appear in the year 2026. Think about that. 2026 is, it's right around the corner. Mentally prepare yourself for what a one-person unicorn actually looks like in practice. It's a single founder orchestrating a massive swarm of AI agents to handle engineering, marketing, distribution, and support, generating $1 billion in value. Whether it hits that exact deadline next year or not, the trajectory is absolutely unmistakable.
So, what is the ultimate takeaway here? We need a total reframe of how we look at data. If you're an investor, a founder, or just someone navigating your own career, stop reading revenue per employee simply as a magical efficiency score. Instead, start reading it as a map. Use it to trace where the work actually went. Was the work genuinely elevated and transformed by a high-trust, incredibly dense team operating in a completely new mode? Or was the work simply outsourced to a sprawling server farm and disguised as a monthly API bill? Telling those two apart is how you honestly understand the mechanics of this completely new economy.
Which brings us to the final and frankly heaviest question you need to walk away with today. It is undeniably thrilling for a small team of builders to have this kind of unprecedented leverage. But, intellectual honesty demands we look at the outside perspective too. If a one-person billion-dollar company is celebrated as the pinnacle of our economic future, what happens to the thousands of displaced workers that the old version of that exact same company would have traditionally employed? The leap in productivity is undeniably real for sure, but so is the profound societal displacement it implies. If one person can do the work of 10,000, the real question isn't how much money they're going to make, it's what the other 9,999 are supposed to do next.